As the U.S. deploys aircraft and warships to the Middle East, President Trump used his State of the Union address to issue a warning to the leaders of Iran ahead of nuclear talks in Geneva tomorrow, while telling those who were there in Capitol Hill that Iran has already developed missiles that he said threaten Europe and some U.S. bases overseas. Listen.
After Midnight Hammer, they were warned to make no future attempts to rebuild their weapons program, and in particular, nuclear weapons, yet they continue. My preference is to solve this problem through diplomacy. But one thing is certain, I will never allow the world's #1 sponsor of terror, which they are by far, to have a nuclear weapon. Can't let that happen.
Andrew Boyd joins me now. He is former chief of operations for the CIA Counterterrorism Mission Center. Andrew, where do you think we are in this? I keep asking members of Congress who appear on this program if it feels to them as if we are on the verge of war with Iran, and I get mixed answers.
Good evening, Major. We could be on the verge of war with Iran. I think during the State of the Union, the president made clear his administration is not going to allow Iran to develop a nuclear weapon. He made reference to the proxy groups, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Shia militias in Iraq. That's unacceptable, a missile threat. And then he did make reference to the thousands of protesters in Iran who were recently killed. Some have been commenting that the president was not specific enough in the State of the Union address. But I think his administration wants some strategic ambiguity going into another round of diplomatic negotiations in Geneva tomorrow. But there is quite a bit of discussion, as you allude to in Congress, that if those negotiations fail, conflict may be imminent.
Andrew, the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi spoke to India TV and talked about negotiations that were going on in June and the memory Iran has of those. I want you to listen to that, please.
We were negotiating last June when Israel attacked us, and then the U.S. joined that attack. So that memory is still fresh for us. The wounds of that aggression is still alive in our minds. So we cannot forget that once we negotiating with the U.S. and then they decided to attack us. This time we are obviously more careful.
How do you parse that, Andrew?
I think the Iranian foreign minister is posturing himself en route to the next round of negotiations. The reality of the 12-day war and the U.S. involvement of it, it was a very specific target to degrade the capability of Iran to develop fissile material for nuclear weapons, and it was in large part successful. What happens tomorrow is critical, but the Iranians are posturing because reflecting back on what happened in June, they're signaling to the world that they may not trust the United States in negotiations, which I think ultimately is the wrong position for the Iranians to take.
I also want to play this soundbite from that same interview where he talks about what might happen if war begins. Listen.
It would be a devastating war. And since the Americans' bases are scattered in different places in the region, then unfortunately perhaps the whole region would be engaged and would be involved. So it is a terrible scenario. I don't even want to talk about that.
Andrew, I've got about 30 seconds. Sum that up for me.
Again, more posturing, obviously a threat, a coercive diplomacy threat going into a negotiation. Yes, the Iranians can cause a lot of mayhem, and frankly, they have been for 2 decades, killing American servicemen in Iraq, funding groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. Ultimately, the United States has much more forces in the region, and it would be devastating for the Iranian regime. I do hope diplomatic negotiations work in the near term, but in the long term, the Iranian regime will continue to be a menace and a destabilizing factor in the Middle East.
Andrew Boyd, I appreciate your expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Major.